Hi, I am Katja Kaine, creator of The Novel Factory and YA fantasy author. I am hosting a series of interviews with successful writers to try to offer some insights into what it's like being a published author, how they got there, what their processes look like, and what the day-to-day writing looks like. Hopefully, with this knowledge, you will be able to take strides towards achieving your own writing goals. You can find more of our resources at our website, novel-software.com, where we have a huge library of articles covering all aspects of the craft of writing and becoming a published author. And if you enjoy this video, please do consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is the second interview in the series, and I am delighted to welcome another good friend and incredible writer, Sue H. Cunningham. Hi, Sue.
Hi,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
inviting
much.
me.
Thank you for being here. So, Sue writes young adult fiction with humour and a hint of magic. She won the Right Mentor Children's Novel Award in 2020 and was an SCBWI Undiscovered Voices winner in 2022. She's also been shortlisted or longlisted for many other awards, including Northern Writers 2022, Bath Children's Novel Award 2020, Sussex Amazing Book Awards 2024, and Buckinghamshire Book Awards 2024. She has also had more than 50 short stories for adults published in the UK and worldwide, which I was really impressed to hear that. That is a lot. So, Sue's debut YA murder mystery, Totally Deceased, which I have here, was published in October 2023. I can personally vouch for Totally Deceased as being hilarious, heartwarming, and a page-turning modern adventure. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's about a girl who wakes up from an emergency heart transplant to find she's being haunted by the heart's owner, original owner, who happens to be a stroppy teenage socialite who was murdered. The story follows the girl and Ghost as they try to get to the bottom of Tilly's murder and bring the killer to justice. It is such a great idea and it delivers on all counts. And now, just a week ago, your second book came out, Cloud Nine, and I am really excited to read it. I have heard it described as a story of a Victorian pickpocket girl who dies and accidentally ends up in the top tier of heaven and then falls in love with a living boy in contemporary Manchester. And I understand that as well as being hilarious and very original, it explores themes of life, death, and what it really means to live a good life, which I find really interesting. So if you enjoy books that will make you laugh and make you think, do give it a read. So thank you so much for joining me today, Sue.
It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so we're doing this series of interviews to help our audience learn more about what it's like to be a professional author and gain useful insights and advice. So let's start at the beginning, and maybe I can ask you, what made you want to be a writer in the first place?
Well, I think I've always wanted to write. I don't actually remember a time when I didn't write, even as a little girl. I wrote lots of stories as a child, and they were kind of mainly Enid Blyton plagiarisms, I think. And I carried on writing well into my teens. I think I only probably stopped when I went off to uni, and I was probably too busy partying to write. Um, but I didn't pick it up again until my children were small. And I think maybe I just wanted something for myself, something, for me. And I remembered how much I'd enjoyed doing it. So yeah, that's when I got back into it.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so you
Mm,
haven't been sort of, consistently solidly writing the whole time or anything like that. That's not a it's
no,
not a necessity, is it, for everybody?
no, and I think there's that people sort of talk about, oh, you've got to write every day and you must have a, routine. And I think, it's something that everybody's a little bit different in how they do it.
Yeah, and I
You
think
can have
that's
big
really
gaps. Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting what you say about doing it when you have young children, because it can be especially hard to find any time when you have young children. But
Mm.
equally, it's kind of really important that you do. And it's really important that you do kind of make sure you do get that time to yourself and don't just lose yourself in the many pressures and time pressures of that. Okay, and so how did you go about pursuing the dream of being published? Or maybe you didn't, maybe you just sort of thought I'll just write for fun at first. How did that go for you?
So I was working and I had small children, so I started small and I started writing short fiction for what people call women's magazines. Um, and I think I just missed the golden age of, when pretty much every woman's magazine had a short story in it. But there was still quite a few magazines that accepted short fiction from, unsolicited short fiction at that time. So I started writing. The market has actually shrunk quite a lot now, which is a real shame. A
Mm.
lot of the magazines have gone over to like celebrity, sort of stories and sort
Right.
of true life stuff. My neighbour's, snake at my Jack Russell, that kind of thing. It's like, from, Barbara in Swansea or whatever. But at the time, they did have, most of the magazines carried at least one short fiction, and it's probably the only time I've been really organised with my writing because they had quite strict word counts. So, one magazine, it might be 650 max, and another magazine would be like, it's got to be either 1,200 words or 2,000 words. And you'd have to kind of be quite adaptable about how you wrote. So I did that at the beginning, and then eventually I started to write longer fiction, and I got into writing novels, and I wrote a really bad rom-com which was set in a hospital, um, which was probably quite cathartic. 'Cause that's my day job, is working in a hospital, and I had some feedback from a very kind published writer who told me that it was very entertaining and it was funny and enjoyable to read, but there was absolutely no character arc. And she said it's just basically a set of anecdotes, which it was really. So I'm moving on. I wrote hopefully a better rom-com, but it had a supernatural thread, and I got some advice from an agent at a writing festival, who said, you're never going to sell this to adults. Have you thought about writing for young adults? And I thought, well, I'll give it a try, and I just felt much more at home. I think it's really important to find your writing brand and find that writing space where you feel comfortable. And I think for me, that is writing young adult fiction.
That is really interesting. And I'm sure the writing all those short stories and, hearing how many you actually managed to get published, that must have been a really good experience for, like you say, discipline, just doing the writing, having those little deadlines to work to, that kind of keep you going. And also, presumably, to get used to the rejection and just sending stuff out, getting
Yeah,
rejected,
yeah,
until you're like not feeling it really anymore.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I must have so many rejections for those short stories because they're just really matter of fact about it. And when they do accept something, they'll just go, yes, we'll have this. And it's there's no kind of like, celebratory thing. It's like, yeah, we'll take this. It's, this much, it needs to be this
Yeah.
many words. And I think the nice thing about writing short fiction is it does make you write quite concisely. It stops you
Yeah.
from overly padding. And I think that's something I've probably carried through to writing longer fiction, is that I'm probably quite good at cutting through the padding and, just getting to the bit that counts really. Um, and my first drafts are normally quite short, and I tend to add to them rather than having to go through and cut
Yeah.
excess stuff. And I think that's the short story um, apprenticeship.
Yeah, interesting. And I was going to mention as well about the first novel, the apprentice novel, as we call them sometimes, um, where it didn't have the character arc, and just that seems to
Mm.
be a theme I hear from lots of writers, where not necessarily the arc, sometimes it's the plot, but either way, the first
Yeah,
novel is quite often just a series of events.
yeah,
And it's learning to make those events all tie together into like a cohesive plot, which is when you kind of start to break through, I think. That's a theme
yeah,
that I've heard quite a lot.
yeah.
Okay, so the next question I've got is please tell us more about how you got your agent and book deal.
So I'd written a couple of young adult novels, and I started engaging with the writing community online, which, as you know, is so welcoming. And I started entering competitions, especially where the ones where they offer feedback. And I applied for some mentoring programs as well. And in 2020, I was very lucky to win the Right Mentor Children's Novel Award competition, which it's actually open now. They're open until April the 1st if you're interested. They're a really supportive writing competition that sort of keep you updated every step of the way, and
Yeah,
you can ask
they're a
for
really good
feedback and things
one.
like that as well. They're really great. Um, and I was offered some mentoring as part of the prize, and I started subbing the novel out in 2020. But as you know, we all know what happened that year.
Uh-huh.
So I had about 12 requests for the full manuscript,
Wow.
and the feedback was all really nice. But basically, people saying, we're not taking on new authors at the moment because of everything that's going on, or that young adult fiction is a really difficult sell at the moment. And in the end, I just, sort of got over it, and I just thought I'm just going to have to start writing something else. And I think in the meantime, I'd, I'd long listed for that was a really interesting thing about this actually, because I'd with the same book I long listed for the Bath Novel Award and for another children's prize.
Was this
Didn't
Totally
even
Deceased?
uh, no, it was a book called 49 Sisters.
Oh, a different book.
Um,
Okay.
Different book, yeah. And another competition, didn't even hit the long list. So it's so subjective, and I think that's the thing to be really bear in mind when you enter competitions is that the first round your book might only be seen by one or two readers, and if that doesn't attract that particular reader, you might not make it through, and if it'd been a different reader you might have done. So
Yeah.
it's just bearing in mind how subjective it is, I think. um
And that was your experience being, because later on you became a judge of these competitions as well, didn't
yes,
you? And you said you
yeah,
found that as well, that it was so
yeah.
subjective on
So
like,
subjective, yeah. And
yeah,
sometimes you'd know that you'd read something, and there might be one other person reading the same set of the same six books as you or whatever, and you're thinking, oh, that person's very like-minded to me, or that person's probably not going to like this if I like it. So it's really interesting,
yeah,
seeing that from the background. It's so subjective, it really
yeah,
is. So don't let it put you off if you don't get through the first time.
yeah.
Um, so anyway, I then sat down and I wrote something else, which ended up being my first published book, Totally Deceased. And that shortlisted for Northern Writers, and I kept applying for these mentoring programs, which I think are absolutely wonderful. But twice I was turned down because I was told, this novel is ready to go. You're ready
Mm.
to sub. And I was like, I am subbing, and it's not getting anywhere. So it's like these sort of these nearly there moments, which is really
Mm.
frustrating. And people saying to me, "Oh, I thought you already had an agent." I was like, "No." So
Mm.
anyway, um, I quite recently joined Scooby, which is a brilliant organisation for children's authors and illustrators, and they run this competition every 2 years called Undiscovered Voices.
And that is,
I,
Scooby is, just clarify if people don't know, so that's SCBWI, which is the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators,
I'm glad you know that because I
which
never know what it
we
stands
call,
for.
yeah, which we all call Scooby because
Of course,
that's just
Scooby.
too impossible to say. Yeah.
That's right. I think you know which competition I'm talking about
I do.
anyway. So so I entered, and then as you know, they choose 12 winners to go into an anthology, which is sent out to agents and publishers across the UK, and which included you and me and
Yes.
some other lovely people who are now our friends. Um, and there's usually a party where they introduce you to the agents and the industry people, but because we were still in the sort of tail end of COVID,
Yeah.
they made the decision not to have the party. So the anthology went out anyway, and for the first time in my writing life, I actually got unsolicited interest in my work, which was very nice but super weird. But I still, even though I'd had some interest, I still had my own wish list of agents who perhaps hadn't seen the anthology. And I just thought, if I'm going to sub to these people that are at the top of my wish list, this is the time to do it when
Yeah.
I've already got interest from other people. So one of the people I subbed to was Rachel Petty, who had previously been editorial director at Macmillan Children's, and she'd very recently swapped to agenting at the Blair Partnership. Um, so I sent out to Rachel and a few other agents, and I was very lucky to receive several offers of representation. So it was very weird after all this
Amazing.
kind of nearly theirs, to get quite a lot of interest in one go. And I
Yeah,
think maybe it's just this was the right book. I don't know. Maybe you've just got to have the right book,
at the right time.
or the right time. Yeah. I spoke with all of the people that had offered rep, and I really liked Rachel. She's really professional, and but she's informal and very sort of easygoing and nice, which suits me very well. And she has this editorial background as well, which really attracted me because I always welcome feedback. I think you can never have too
Yeah.
much feedback. So I accepted representation on April Fool's Day,
Oh
and
God,
then
scary.
and then I'm waiting for the contract to come, in case it was just an elaborate joke.
Yes.
Um, and the worst bit was then having to decline the other agents' offers, as they were also nice. And I know that is a real first world problem. Um,
Yeah, but
mm,
it's excruciating. It's
it
true.
is really
It's
when you've been waiting so long for them to say yes to you, and then you have to turn around and say no to them, and it's a slight. And they were all so lovely.
yeah,
Any one of them I would have been happy to go with, but it's really lovely to be in the position where you can
yeah,
choose.
absolutely. Wow, so exciting. And then Rachel took Totally Deceased and
Yes,
the
yes.
rest
So
is history.
we did some minor edits, and the book went out on Sub quite quickly. And interestingly, one of the judges on the Undiscovered Voices competition was Yasmin Morrissey, who at that time was a senior editor at Scholastic, and she'd already been in touch with me to say that she'd loved the opening chapters, and once I had an agent, would I let her know? It's like once I've got an agent.
Uh,
Um, so because many of the big publishing houses don't accept
mm,
unagented submissions,
yeah,
um, she said, let us know when you've got an agent, and we'd love to see it. So it went out on submission, but actually Yasmin had asked to see it early, and Scholastic made an early offer within like a week. So
nice.
which is brilliant because
Yeah.
I'm not very good at waiting. Um, and literally I think this was kind of by the July, Rachel had negotiated a two-book deal, and my first book published the following year. So it was after, all this time, it happened really quickly for
A
me.
whirlwind, yeah. And that,
Yeah,
that 1 week turnaround for sub is like really lucky and not normal at all, is
it's
it?
not
I
normal
mean,
at
it
all.
can
It's
take a
not normal
really
at
long
all.
time.
Yeah, some people on submission for months,
Yeah,
up to a year, and it's not any reflection on the book. It can be, how busy they are and what the climate is and how much else they've got to read. And I was very fortunate.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I found that as well with my own experience that it was like a really just nothing for like 13 years. And then everything happened in 1 year. And
Yeah,
it's just funny how quickly it can change. And those near misses that you talked about earlier as well, they just get harder and harder, don't they? So,
they do. I think the nearly theirs are the worst, really, because you're
yeah.
thinking it's so close.
And that's the closest I came to giving up actually, when I got a few really painful near misses. And I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this, but
Yeah,
you also can't stop either. So
yeah.
you have to
Mm.
carry on. Okay. And what was it like publishing your first book?
It was lovely, but I had absolutely no idea what to expect.
Mhm.
And I've just done it all again
Yeah.
last week. I was much more prepared this time around. So I think it's really helpful to get as much information as you can, really. Scooby run a debut boot camp for writers that are just about to publish or have recently published with really
Hmm.
interesting information about the industry. And there's loads of podcasts as well that you can listen to, like Publishing Rodeo, which is very truthful. So
Yes.
sometimes,
Yes. It's quite
sometimes
scarily
it tells you
candid
things you don't
sometimes,
want to
isn't
know.
it?
But I think I'm always one of these people that I'd prefer to know.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think what I like about that one as well is that they just say it, all the stuff that everybody skirts around most of
yeah,
the time and that you just don't find out until it's too late. They just tell
yeah,
you. So it's a really great podcast. Publishing
yeah.
Radio, that is, if anyone didn't get
Yeah.
that. And so it was quite different, you said, publishing your second book then. How would you say, because you just knew more about the process?
Yeah, just because I knew more about what to expect and I was a bit more realistic about things. And yeah, I suppose I was in some ways more worried about things because I knew a bit more about what was going on, and in other ways less worried because I'd been through it before, and
Hmm.
and the everybody at the agency and at the publishers look after me really well. So yeah, there's always somebody to hold your hand through it.
That's good to know. Okay. So let's move on to talking about the writing itself. Can you tell me a bit about your process of writing? Do you do a lot of planning? Do you not? How do you get from blank page to final manuscript?
I'm very disorganized. I don't plot. I just usually start with an interesting concept, or a character, but probably a concept really, and then I just start writing, and then I write very randomly, and very instant gratification. So if there's a scene that I want to write, even if it's completely out of order, I will just sort of sit down and write it. I need to get it down quickly. And I know there's a lot of writers that will write their way towards a scene that they really want to write as a reward. And I kind of can't do that. I just like, right, well, I'm going to write it now. And I have these manuscript with huge gaps, which I then have to fill in later. And because I'm such a messy writer, I do lots of drafts. And towards the end, I do that post-it note thing where you write all the scenes out on bits of paper and then you move them around and try and sort of get them into a more coherent order where they fit best. But I do think I could probably save myself a lot of time if I had a process. So I'm very interested in your software and
Yes,
whether you could reform me
we'll
into
talk
an
about that.
organized into an organized plotter.
Maybe, but yeah, possibly. But I think that like when I first started writing, it literally didn't occur to me that anyone would write without planning. Like the idea just was so mind-blowing. And yeah, now I know that so many people write that way.
Mhm.
And I think that yes, possibly like having a plan might stop you having to spend so much time on editing, but also that might just be your creative process. And
Mm,
having a plan might just ruin everything. So we'll certainly have a look at that. And I think we
yeah.
said that we'll have a chat about the software and what it can do. And it'll be interesting to see how it can assist pantsers because I have definitely had people come to me before saying, I'm a pantser, but you give me just the right amount of structure
Yeah.
to do that. So that'll be great. But I also think that a lot of people will be feel relieved to hear you say that you just write the scene that you want to
Mm,
when you want to out of order because
yeah.
I have heard, I've had people ask the question like, am I allowed to do that? Is
Mm,
that bad? Is it,
mm,
bad practice? And yeah, I think knowing that you can really be successful doing it that way and just trust your instincts and,
mm.
I think that's really great for people to hear.
I think so, and I
Um,
think it's your book at the end of the day, and it's supposed to be enjoyable. It's not supposed to be a job. It's supposed to be something that we do. For me, it's like a stress reliever, and it's something that I enjoy doing. So, you should be able to do it the way you want to do it. And some people are that, like a car with the headlights on, they can only write 1 or 2 pages ahead, and that's their process, and that's fine for them.
Yeah, I have to write everything in order. I mean, I
Mm,
I plot, so I will have a like detailed structure, so I do know where it's going
mm,
mostly, but then I have to go from the beginning to the end. I cannot write a scene in the middle at all. And what inspired you to write Cloud Nine?
Um, well, I quite like a proverb, and that saying, live every day as if it's your last. I sort of got to thinking about what if your actions on your final day on Earth really do impact on where you end up in the afterlife. And I love humour and I love a bit of magic. So I thought it'd be a really fun idea to explore this in a contemporary setting.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, I find that really interesting from the blurb on the back that your where you end up really just does depend on your last day and how kind of how would that make
Yeah.
you act if you really knew that?
Well, it's kind of set out. I suppose it's a bit like GCSE coursework in that you have a kind of provisional cloud status. Depending on how your actions beforehand, but the actions on your final day can kind of give you a
I
bump up or a drop down slightly. You wouldn't sort of plummet unless you've done something really really bad. But if you're kind of predicted cloud seven, which is kind of quite nice for just generally nice people that haven't done anything earth shattering but are just generally nice. And then you're like really horrible on your last day, you might dip down to cloud six, which is a bit
What
more generic.
what a brilliant idea. And what gave you the ideas for the characters in Cloud Nine?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the Oh, you've caught me out now. Um,
Sorry, just try. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about it a bit more.
um, so my main character, Evangeline, is a Victorian pickpocket. So I do quite like a morally grey character.
Yeah,
Um, and I think, certainly in Victorian times, something like living that lifestyle would be, a necessity for somebody. You be forgiven for not living your best life if you had to do that to survive. But deep down, she's a nice person, and she loves her brother, and ultimately she dies saving somebody else's life. She's completely accidental, but then gives her this bump up to the very sort of top
level.
tier of the afterlife. Yeah,
No.
and her love interest is just a nice guy who volunteers in a hospital and loves reading books. So he's like my ideal guy, really.
And he can see her, is that right? And he shouldn't
He
be
can
able
see
to.
her. You shouldn't be able to see her. So usually, most people can't see. She has this job as a celestial guide, which is to come and assist people. Maybe to give them a bit of a bump up on their final day if they're in danger of perhaps jeopardizing their cloud
Right.
status by doing something a bit selfish or a bit unkind on the last day. You can kind of just give them a bit of a nudge to make sure that they sort of maintain their cloud status, or ideally bump up a little bit if you can. And many people that are dying can't see the celestial guides until their sort of final minutes, or they perhaps
Yeah.
don't see them at all until after they've died. So when this guy can see her and he doesn't look at all as if he's in any way about to die anytime soon, she's really baffled. And basically, he continues to see her, even when it becomes clear that he's not on his last legs.
Yeah, I see. Oh, interesting. I can't wait to read it. And what do you find most difficult about either being a writer or being a published author? Because they're sort of more about, about the writing process itself or about having it as a career.
Um, I don't like the first draft. I'm very feared of that empty page, and I'm a terrible procrastinator, unless I've got a deadline. So I sometimes have to set myself a deadline, even if I haven't got an official one. Otherwise, I just won't do it. I'm much better once I've got something to work with, and I really like the final edits, where I'm just tweaking the dialogue and adding the little funny bits, and um, I like the attention to detail part of the writing rather than the broad strokes. And I think from being published, I'm a very sociable person, but I really don't like formal public speaking. So I find that aspect of promotional stuff quite difficult for me, and I try and avoid that where possible. I'm a bit, find it a bit easier face to face or online, but not kind of like in a room full of people. That's
Yeah.
my
And
worst thing.
I think that's fairly common for us writers, isn't it? That there's a high correlation with introverts as well. So
Mm.
the idea of standing up in front of people and talking about ourselves and our work is quite challenging. Okay, and what's your favorite bit about writing and about being an author?
Um, well, I love the writing community. I think children's writers and publishing people are so lovely and so supportive of one another, and also no one told me that you get sent free books as well, which is amazing. So you get sent other people's books to read and review, and that's like amazing. It's like my
That's the best.
perfect job.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually like getting feedback from readers, and people say you should never read your reviews, and I know some
Mm.
people don't read them, but I do. I read all of them, even the mean ones, and unfortunately, I've not had too many of those. But it's very interesting what people get hung up on and
Well,
what they
let's
think
tell
that
us
they'll.
more about that. What are some of your interesting mean reviews?
Um, well, my first book is about a girl who wakes up from a heart transplant to find that she's been haunted by the ghost of her donor, and they, in solving the mystery, they have to go on a trip, and they should get on a flight, and the girl who's had the heart transplant is 17, and the other girl is a ghost. And somebody had written a review saying this book is really unrealistic because how can two teenagers just get on a plane? And I was like, and that's the bit you've got the problem with.
Yes.
Like, a ghost, and it's like, blah, blah.
That's all
Um,
fine.
yeah, and I was thinking, well, my 17-year-old son got on a plane last year, went on holiday with his friends. It is perfectly legal in the UK to get on a
Yes.
plane if you're over 16 on your own. Um, so I was like, okay. Um,
Yeah. It's funny what people get hung up about. And especially with fantasy, as you say, when there's like, elephants flying all over the place and balloons exploding in confetti, and it's like, oh, but that
yeah,
that
yeah.
detail is
No, that
wrong.
that bit about the plane,
Yeah,
no.
that is funny. Okay, so on to sort of advice on writing. How do you develop three-dimensional characters? And I guess maybe character arcs as well. T Thinking about how you said with the first book you didn't have the character arc. So how did you learn how to do that, or how do you develop a character arc these days?
Um, I suppose you're thinking, well, they've got to have some sort of conflict, haven't they? And they've got to. I think the important thing is that you remember that the word protagonist, doesn't just mean main character; it means an active participant. So you have to make sure that they drive the narrative, and their actions and decisions, however flawed those decisions are, um, will impact on the story and what happens. And you don't just let stuff happen to them.
Yeah,
Um, and I think it's really important for your characters to have flaws to make them well-rounded. And I also really like dialogue. That's probably my favorite thing to write. And I think it's a really easy way to get your character's personality across. Is a couple of lines of dialogue can really cover huge ground in sort of showing what sort of person your character is.
yeah.
So I tend to put quite a lot of dialogue in for my characters.
Nice. Thank you for that. Okay, and what about plot, especially well, there's the main plot, but also where you have a murder mystery in the first book. So then you need subplots and dropping clues, that kind of thing. How do you organize all of that?
Well, bearing in mind what I've told you earlier,
Mm.
not well. Um, so I pretty much do everything retrospectively, thinking, oh, it would be really clever to put something in here
Yeah,
that then sort of, gives you a bit of foreshadowing about this event that's going to happen later. But I don't put that in beforehand. I put it in afterwards. And sometimes people have said to me, I love the way the subplot mirrors the main, storyline or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh, that's handy because that was that was not intentional. And it's very much retrospective. I'm just not organised enough to have that plotted out in advance. So I just do the clever bits in the editing stage, and then hopefully just make sure that I do like to make sure that when I'm editing, I've ticked every box. I don't like it when I've left a thread sort of I try and wrap everything up.
yeah.
But that is retrospective. It's not planned in advance.
Yeah, I think I'm similar actually. I kind of have a cool idea and then have to like weave in the earlier bits later on. And sometimes that's the only way to do it if it's arising organically from the scene and from,
Mm.
what the characters are saying to each other and what's around them. I think it's a good way to do it. Okay, final question then. What advice would you give to aspiring writers, your pearls of wisdom?
Um, I would say so from a technical point of view. And going back to my short story background, I would say cut the padding, make every word count, and get in and out of a scene as quickly as you can. So don't feel like you have to fill space between scenes. If a character's, traveling from one place to another, you don't have to describe the journey unless it's an interesting journey, like if it's a Hobbit or something like that, that's fine. They're going on a journey, and that is the book. But if it's just a means to an end to get them to the other place, then you just need to put a line or two to span that. And I think, especially if you're writing for teens, as I do, they've got a very short attention span. With the greatest respect, they're used to everything being bite-sized, like 7-second TikToks. So they don't like to be kept hanging around for too long. I just get on with it, try and make it pacey. And I would say as well, when you're editing, if there's a part when you're editing that you tend to skip over yourself and think, oh, I'll come back
Mm,
to that later, that's probably a hint that the reader will, also skip over that bit. So I think you need to make sure that everything that you're writing feels exciting, even if you're reading it, for the millionth time and you're editing it after, sure, X draft, whatever. That each bit of the book should be as enjoyable for you to read and edit as it would be for the reader to read it. And if there are bits where you're a bit, I'll leave that bit till later, then it might be telling you something. And I think from a wider sort of industry point of view, I would say the most important thing is just finding your tribe of people, seeking out other writers, learning to give and receive feedback. Because even, when you get an agent and get a publisher, the journey is nowhere near over, and you might as well get used to being edited and, receiving feedback, because that's going to happen all the way through. So I think be really grateful for any feedback you get from anybody, whether it's good or bad. If you get a rejection from a publisher, if they've given you even a snippet of personalized feedback, it's like gold dust. It's really important. I've had so many rejections, with form rejections or no replies at all. So if somebody actually gives you even a little bit of personalized feedback, that's a real step in the right direction. And just to be nice, be kind, be nice, because the publish industry is a really small world, and you need to get on with people. So
Yeah.
be nice. That's my biggest piece of advice.
And good advice in general for life.
Yeah, be nice. Yeah, we are all nice, though. We're all
We
nice.
we are.
We are.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much for talking to me, Sue. It's been really, really interesting. And I think there's been so much useful information for our subscribers and audience as well. Um, I find it so interesting to get insights into how other people do things. Um, so both Totally Deceased and Cloud9 are out in all good bookshops now. They are perfect for anyone who enjoys funny, heartfelt and original YA stories. You can follow Sue on Instagram and TikTok at Sue H. Cunningham and Twitter at Susie Writes. If you enjoyed listening to this interview, please do leave a comment below and subscribe for more of our content, which is all about improving your craft and achieving your writing goals and dreams. And until next time, goodbye. Thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you so much for inviting me.